Hey everyone, welcome to another video tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to make a stamp pad holder entirely out of chipboard. So here I have a 12 by 12 inch piece of chipboard and I'm just cutting it using a standard paper trimmer. It is possible to cut chipboard with a paper trimmer like this. It doesn't go all the way through on the first couple of passes, but if you fold it, you let a crease on the other side so you can turn it right over. Use that crease as a guide, and then you'll be able to cut through the entire piece of chipboard. Just like that. Okay, so here I have cut out all my chipboard pieces that I'm going to need. This one that I'm measuring here is the spine. It's what's going to divide the shelves inside the rack. I just measured halfway through. And now I'm going to measure all the shelves as well. I'm going to measure 1 inch. I'm doing this so that I can cut grooves in both the spine and the shelves so that they sit nicely and have decent support within the system. Okay, so now I'm just cutting out those grooves. I made a mark in the center of each of the shelves, and then I measured 1/16 of an inch around the mark. And now I'm just cutting it out with an X-Acto blade. This is going to allow for the chipboard to fit through because the chipboard itself is 1/16 of an inch. Okay, and this is the spine. The spine has 6 of those grooves that I need to cut out, so 5 of those grooves, so each of the shelves will fit inside. Okay, so out pops the chipboard pieces. And then I'm just going to file it down to get out any imperfections, make it nice and smooth. Don't file it too much though because you want it to be a snug fit. Okay, then I'm just going to test and make sure that they fit, and they do. Some of them are a little loose, but that's okay. Now I'm just going to test it and make sure it fits nicely on the background. The background is a 6 by 6 inch piece of chipboard, and I want to make sure everything fits and lines up nicely. I'm also going to check and make sure a stamp pad will fit in. The space in between each shelf is a little less than 1 inch. Okay, so now I'm going to cover the chipboard. Sometimes it's easier to cover the chipboard before you put the box together because in this case, the spaces in between each shelf is going to be too small to fit paper in between. So I'm going to cover it ahead of time and then glue it together. This paper here is just for the inside of the box. So I'm going to take away the pieces I don't need and go ahead and cut the paper. The measurements for the paper are going to be coming up and you'll be able to read them, but mostly you're going to need 4 by 6 inch pieces of paper to cover the inside. So we'll just go ahead and cut some of those. Okay, here are your measurements. Alright, the spine is the trickiest to cover. It's important to make sure that you're able to cut out each of those grooves and file the paper down as well. And you don't want to get paper glued all inside and stuck because it's really important to be able to fit each of the shelves into the groove. So I'm just going to cover it with the paper. Okay, what I'm going to do next is take my X-Acto knife before I fold it and make a slit along each side of the groove. This way when I glue down the other side of the paper, I'll be able to use the grooves on the outside as a guide, and then I'll be able to cut away all my paper. And I'll also be able to file it once it's cut away. This is important also because you want to make sure that it's a snug fit, but the shelves do fit in. Okay, time to cover the shelves. I decided that I wasn't going to cover the entire shelf. It's really not going to be seen, the inside, so I decided to save some of my paper and just cover the tip, the outermost edge that's going to be seen. I'm using a lot of glue just to make sure that it's adhered nicely because it's going to be a shelf that's used and I want to make sure it holds up to wear and tear. Again, I'm going to file off any of the excess paper to make sure it's nice smooth edges. Alright, all my shelves are done, so let's do the sides of the box as well as the back. For the sides of the box, again, I'm using a 4x6 inch piece of paper. This time I'm covering the whole thing. You don't have to, you can leave an inch in the back if you want to, just like the shelves. I chose to do the whole thing just because it's easier. And I'm having an inch fold over onto the other side. The other side doesn't need to be completely covered because it's the outside of the box, and that's going to get covered later. Again, just sanding down any of the edges. As you see, the paper's falling off, and the file does a nice job at getting a nice smooth edge on the chipboard. Okay, the back of the box is going to be 6x6, so I'm just going to cut down a 6x6 inch piece of paper. I'm using a contrasting paper for this, just to add a little pop of color if you happen to look inside the shelf unit. Okay, now I'm just going to glue the box together. I'm using a mix of hot glue and regular glue. For the spine, I'm going to use hot glue. I'm going to stick a dab of glue at the very inside of the joint here. Kind of catches along the way as the hot glue dries. Then I'm going to use my grid to line it up and make sure it's as straight as I can get it. Do the same process all the way down with each shelf. Again, I'm trying to line it up as best as I can. It's not a big deal to me if it's not perfect. It's a homemade project, so it doesn't have to be as perfect as I'd expect it to be if I were getting it from a store. I try to do the best I can, but if it's not, then it's just a little character that adds to it, and you can be proud of it. Okay, I'm just add a spot of hot glue over the top of each of them to make sure that they're adhered well and they're not going to pull out. And then I'm going to be placing this onto the back of the box. To do this, I decided it was going to be easiest to draw some guidelines. So I'm going to mark the center of my box where the spine is going to be glued. And I'm draw that in pencil. Next, I'm going to mark every inch for each of the shelves so that I can put a dot of glue on each side to help hold the shelves down. So I'm just going to take my hot glue gun and run a line of glue down the center, and then each of those dots that I marked on the side. Then I'll take my shelves and I'll try to line it up as best as I can along the glue lines that I've just laid down. It's important to try to be quick when you do this because the hot glue does dry, but if need be, you can always use your heat tool on the other side to help set it if it dries too quickly. Now I'm going to be attaching the top and the bottom of the box, again using some hot glue. I do try to be careful with the lines that I make with the hot glue because it's difficult to kind of wipe up your mess with hot glue, especially if it dries. It's going to take the paper away with it. The nice thing about using hot glue, though, is it dries very quickly, so you can get your, well, the nice thing and the not so nice thing is that it dries very quickly, but you can get your pieces in place and hold them down, and you don't have to hold them for a long period of time while the glue sets. And hot glue is a pretty strong hold as well, so I think it's good for this project. Okay, so now I've got the top and the bottom on, and I'm just going to double check one more time to make sure that the stamp pads are going to fit in, and they do. Okay, now I'm going to glue on the sides. For the sides, I decided that hot glue wasn't going to work so well because there's so many shelves to glue down that the glue is going to dry before you get it on each shelf, and then the side's not going to stick. So I'm using some glossy accents here. It's a nice strong hold, but it's not such a quick drying glue as the hot glue. So I'm just going to put that on the inside shelves and then use hot glue to line the outside of the shelves. Okay, then I'm going to line up the side and press firmly while it adheres. The glossy accents is going to take a little while to dry, so it's important to set it and let it hold before you move on. Now I'm going to be applying the outside paper. The paper on the outside also helps to hold the box together, so I use a lot of glue when doing this to make sure it's a strong, secure fit. The paper for the sides of the box are going to be oversized on both of the sides as well as the back. This is so that you get a nice clean finish. You don't have any joints to be cleaning up or making sure that they're perfect. It allows for a lot of a decent room for error. So here you can see I'm cutting off the corners, and I cut them at a little angle because they wrap around nicer. And then I'll just fold those down and then glue them. These will eventually get covered, so they don't have to be identical in length or look perfect. It's really just to have a nice secure box and a nice clean finish. So do that for the top and the for both sides, and then the top and the bottom are the next ones, and the top and the bottom are only have extra length for the back because it would look silly to have extra length on the sides. So I'll just fold down the back, trim out those edges again at an angle, and then glue it down. And you can add a back to the box, or you don't have to, it's optional. If you're not going to see the back, then don't worry about it. But there's the finished box.